Caught is a 1996 erotic thriller film. Betty and Joe own a fish shop. One day, a lonely man named Nick enters the shop. This man who looks sick wants some food. Betty and Joe, who takes pity on Nick's situation, does not want to leave him out, and they invite him to dinner. Dinner. Betty and Joe, who love him more, offer him a job at the fishing shop. Nick readily accepts this. They give Nick the room of his son, who lives out of town. Quickly adjusting to his new job, Nick begins learning the fishing trade with the help of Joe and Betty. Nick's getting a job and moving home has had a positive impact on the household. Joe goes to work more happily. Betty, on the other hand, begins to pay more attention to her beauty. I think Betty is trying to look nice to this young man. Nick starts to like this mature and sexy Betty, but he does not reveal this secretly to anyone. He constantly watches Betty with his eyes, with evasive glances. He also became good friends with Joe. They do sports and trade together. He's like Joe's son. Betty walks around the house in a bathrobe all the time. This situation pleases Nick. Nick is starting to get even more impressed with Betty. Betty is aware of this situation and has started doing it on purpose. And the end will be expected. While Betty and Nick meet and chat in the kitchen at night, they suddenly start kissing. This mature woman and young man are secretly making love in a very hot way. Betty made the rice pudding she hasn't made in 20 years because Betty is in good spirits. The mature woman makes love to the young man at every opportunity, and it keeps her morale high. It makes her feel like a young woman. This brave duo, who is constantly on the verge of being caught, is lucky to avoid being caught. But there will be a development that will make things even more complicated. Their son, who lives outside the city, comes home with his family by surprise. Seeing her son in front of her, Betty is shocked. Betty, who hasn't seen her grandchild for a long time, is happy to see her. When the son goes inside, he sees Nick to lie down in his room and is surprised by this situation. He asks who he is and gets the answer that he is a restaurant employee. This situation does not please his son at all. Danny begins to suspect a stranger in the house. While Betty and Nick are secretly making love in the bathroom, Joe wakes up to use the toilet. Joe, who comes to the bathroom to use the toilet, terrifies the wife and young man who are making love inside. But this forbidden love makes it even hotter. Nick goes to Danny's house to drop fish, but Danny is not at home. His wife and child are at home. Danny's wife asks Nick for help with childcare. Meanwhile, Danny comes home, but when he sees Nick at home, he is disturbed by this situation. She suspects an affair between his wife and Nick. They go on a family picnic. They dance like crazy and have fun. As Betty sits down, she sees the leg appearing between the legs. He thinks this leg belongs to Nick and he likes it. After a while, Nick stands up, but the foot is still between his legs. He realizes that this leg belongs to Danny and realizes that it is his son's trap. Now Danny knows everything. This forbidden love was learned by the third person. Danny's wife comes to Nick, beaten up. She tells him that Nick abused her and asks for help. She says he wants to go from here and he needs money. Nick helps her. He puts her on the bus and sends her out of this city. Danny gets mad when he finds out about this. He thinks that Nick has taken away his family, wife, and child. He calls his father to explain this situation. Joe asks Nick about this. Nick tries to leave the shop without answering. Betty grabs him and begs him not to go. Seeing this situation, Joe watches what is happening in a confused way. Betty tells Nick she's in love. Hearing that he was betrayed, the man has a nervous breakdown. The man who has a heart attack dies on the spot. This upsets Nick and Betty. While Nick is standing in the rain after the event, Danny comes by. He tells him he has a gift and kills Nick with the knife.